Yeah. Okay. So the next tshuva is Pidyon haben mikohen shenitbarer shu halal. Okay. Pidyon haben from a kohen that it was discovered that he's not a kosher kohen after the fact. So there's a financial aspect here as well. Yesh Yehudi Yirei Shamayim Shuhu Kohen. There's a God-fearing Jew. He happens to be a kohen. V'rabim ibnei edatenu or adatenu asu etzlo pidyon haben. Many people from our kehillah used him as the kohen for their son's pidyon haben. Ve'atanoda al pi edim ksherim she'imo b'tzeiruta niv'ala logoy. And now it's been discovered with reliable witnesses that his mom had a non-Jewish boyfriend when she was younger, before she got married, and she became a balas tshuva, which made her not fit to marry a kohen. One of the qualifications for a kohen, he's allowed to marry a girl who's had experience. She doesn't have to be a virgin. Only a kohen gadol has to marry a virgin, but a regular kohen can only marry a girl who has not consorted with a Gentile, with a non. So it sort of makes it hard for kohanim who want to marry a balas tshuva, and it creates difficulties. So the question is, v'hashe'elahi, ha'im kol eila she'asu etzlo pidyon haben, chayavim lachzor v'lifdot et benav shenit, me'achar she'itbarer shu halal. Here's the question. Do all those people who made a pidyon haben through this kohen, do they have to redeem their son with a different kohen?
How about does the kohen have to give back the 5
kohens
as well?
That's the next question. V'chein, ha'im hakohen hanal chayav lahachzir et hakesef shekibel l'chol elu she'asu etzlo pidyon haben? Does the kohen now have to return all the money? That's a lot of shekels. Okay. 5 shekels per person.
Effectively. I mean, it wasn't his fault.
It's not his fault. It's not his fault, but it was given to him under false pretenses.
And it's not his action that causes him not to be a Kohen.
That's right. It's no fault of his.
Yeah.
He was told his whole life that he's a Kohen.
Right. And his dad is still a Kohen.
His dad is still a Kohen, but his dad is in trouble now if he's still married to this woman, because now he can't duchen. And there's a big issue here.
So you can go which ones.
That's right. Zichrona livracha. Hagemara omeret b'masechet kiddushin kohen shahaya omed umakriv al gabe hamizbeach benoda shuhu ben grushu ben chalutza. So let's take a look at the tshuva. The Gemara says that if a kohen is in the Beis Hamikdash offering korbanos, and all of a sudden we discover that he's not a legitimate kohen, that his mother was a divorcee, or she had previously gotten chalitza before she married his father. Avodato sha'avad kavar keshera. So the Gemara says, b'di'eved, his avoda is kosher. In other words, his korbanos that he offered are kosher. Shenemar v'haitalo ulazaro acharav, that it shall be for him and all of his future seed, referring to Aaron, bein zera kosher, bein zera pasul. The Gemara says seed means that there's a certain kahuna that remains regardless of whether the offspring is kosher or not. Ve'avuha dishma, in other words, even though lechatchila he's not allowed to act as a kohen in the temple, but b'di'eved he's still a kohen to the point where his avoda is still considered kosher b'di'eved.
That's if he's acting without the knowledge that he's not a kohen.
It doesn't say one way or the other. It doesn't say.
So
even if he does it maliciously, we have no reason to suspect that it wouldn't be good b'di'eved. He's not allowed to, but if he does it, the question is for the person that he brought the korban for. The person who brought the korban for, is he messed up or is he not messed up? So the Gemara says b'di'eved it's kosher. V'yavuha dishmul lama din zeh mehapasuk borech Hashem chelo ufo al yadav tirtzeh. that the Shmuel's father learns it out from the bracha that Moshe gave to Levi, that may God bless his strength and his handiwork he will desire. Afilu chulin shabo tirtze, meaning even things that were profaned by him because he wasn't a kosher kohen, Hashem will still desire. V'chein pasuk HaRambam, the Rambam paskins that, and he says, Kohen she'avad v'niv v'dak v'nimtza chalal, avodak sheira l'she'avar ve'ein oved lahaba. He says, if a Kohen did the avoda, and it was discovered that he's a chalal, which is a non-kosher Kohen, because his lineage is tainted, his avoda, past avoda, anything that he did in the past is kosher, but he may not serve in the future. V'im avad lo chilel, and if he does, he has not profaned his handiwork. Shenamar, Barech Hashem chelo ufal yadav tirtzeh, that may God bless his strength, and his handiwork you shall desire. It could be they're doing a play on words, that the word chelo doesn't just mean strength, but it means even that which is chulin, even that which has been profaned, tirtzeh, you shall desire Hashem. So that's on the one hand. Le'umat zot, haGemara omeret b'maseches Makos, that the Gemara says that if a person murders unintentionally, shenigmar dino leleches la'ari miklat v'achar kach noda she'hakohen hagadol chalal, so he's on his way to go to a city of refuge. Now we know that there's a halacha. How long must a person who's the unintentional killer until the Kohen Gadol dies? That's right. Okay. We discover now that the Kohen Gadol is not a legitimate Kohen Gadol. He's a chalal, something wrong with his lineage. So nechlaku b'gemara sham ha'im mesa ha'kahuna v'lo tzarech liglos mishum shezen nechshav kamo shemesa Kohen Gadol v'lo chen chazer ha'rotzeach lihiro. So do we look at this as, oh, Kohen Gadol's dead because there's no Kohen Gadol now, and therefore he doesn't have to go to the Ir Miklat? Oh, Shabbat la kahuna v'dino kamosh misha nigmar dino below Kohen Gadol sheinu chozer me'or miklat olam. Or does he never get freed from the Ir Miklat because we view him as someone who is exiled at a time where there is no Kohen Gadol, and the halacha there is that he never, he's there forever for the rest of his life.
So I thought he had to make it to the city of refuge.
So, yeah.
I thought he was open to be killed by the.
Well, that's the theme. You're right. That's the theme, Doug. However, the Gemara, I guess, derives that as long as the Kohen Gadol's around, after his judgment has been passed, like after he said, based in Paskins, you must go to an Ir Miklat. From that moment forward, he is. We base his status based on the present Kohen Gadol. So he gets paskined, you have to go to an Ir Miklat. He's on his way, like he's being escorted to an Ir Miklat as we speak. 5 minutes later, we discover the Kohen Gadol is a chalal. So up until now, there was a Kohen Gadol, an assumption of a kosher Kohen Gadol. But now the question is the Kohen Gadol considered dead and he gets to go free? Or is it as that lemafreya, that retroactively there never was a Kohen Gadol, and therefore he's got to go and stay there the rest of his life? Upasak HaRambam Zal, and the Rambam says as follows: Nigmar dino v'nimtza hakohen ben grusha, batla hakahuna ve'ena yotze misham la'olam. The Rambam paskins like the latter. He says that if he was, if it was ruled that he must go to an Ir Miklat, and then shortly thereafter we discover that the Kohen Gadol is not kosher, his mother was a divorcee, let's say, so then he has to remain there for the rest of his life. And it sounds like from there that he doesn't have the status of a Kohen at all, this Kohen Gadol. So the question is, why is it when it comes to Karbanos, we say that b'di'evet he's still a Kohen, and when it comes to this halacha of the Ir Miklat, he never was a Kohen. So which one is it? Ella sheyesh lechalek bein avoda legolus. The answer is, says the Gemara, that there's a difference between sacrificial service and the Kohen Gadol's protective abilities for someone who has to go to an Ir Miklat. The Davka ba'avoda, Gezeras HaKasav hi lahachshir b'di'eved avodas ben grusha. Only when it comes to karbanos do we say that the Torah says b'di'eved, a Kohen who's a chalal, his avoda is still kosher. Shenemar borech Hashem chelo. May God bless his chulin. Ma she'ein kein legabe galus de'ein gzeras hakasav. But that pasuk does not apply to something that has nothing to do with sacrificial service. V'chein kasav b'shut chavos yair. And that's what the Chavos Yair writes as well. Ulefizah. Accordingly, pidyon haben she'eno avoda, a pidyon haben is also not a form of avoda. It's just that the Kohen receives the redemption money and affects the redemption, but it doesn't fall under the rubric of that pasuk of Barech Hashem Chelo. So therefore, me'acharu batla kahuna habechorim enam peduyim v'chayv hakohen ala hachzir lemesakes of shekibol me'hahorim. So then it turns out that the firstborn are not considered redeemed, and this Kohen must return the money that he accepted for all those pigeon abins in the past. Man, that's tough.
Especially if it's all spent.
Yeah, what is, I mean, that's not the main issue. How much is the money for a pigeon haben? Each silver coin is maybe worth $20. So it's $100 a pop. So how many Kohanim, a Kohen, how many pigeon habens can he have done in a lifetime?
How many have you done?
I've done maybe a dozen. It's not like it's not gonna bankrupt me if I have to. The question, I don't remember everyone that I've done.
What you've done.
I don't remember everyone I've done.
Yeah.
Maybe I've done 2 dozen. I couldn't even tell you. But it's not such a common occurrence, you know that, right?
My dad had a lot of coins. He put them in one of those Crown Royal bags.
Yeah,
And back then it was a silver dollar was silver.
yeah.
No, he must have the other money. It became stolen, but he must have about 40 in there.
Okay, so what does that mean? He did eight. He did eight.
Right.
He did 8 pigeon
Right.
events.
Yeah.
Okay,
Listen,
so again, that's not going to bankrupt the estate, right?
no, I think the problem will be remembering how.
The problem is going to be remembering.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Who do you do?
They say in the name of the Vilna Gaon that the Vilna Gaon was the firstborn, and he used to regularly go to a Kohen and say, "Would you accept redemption for me?" Just in case the other Kohanim that I've used were not kosher Kohanim. Yeah. Like he would just, like every couple of years, he'd go over to a random Kohen and say,
That's another one.
yeah, because I guess he had this issue. Ela shira'isi b'pischei tshuva, shehevi b'shem shut yad Eliyahu, shekasav lechalek bein im noda shehakohen hu be'emes Yisrael, o noda shehu ben grusha v'chalutza. The Pischei Tshuva, however, makes a distinction. Like, what if you discover that the Kohen is a Yisrael? He's not really a Kohen. That's the case I mentioned to you a few weeks ago, or a couple of weeks ago, when we first started. We looked at the table of contents. There was a prominent rabbi in Los Angeles who was a Kohen and served as a rabbi for a number of years. And then he fell in love with one of the divorcees in his shul, and
So he was no longer a Cohen.
realized, was brought to his attention that he was not a Kohen. And he brought reasons, and when he was younger, he had been adopted or raised by other people, and had reason to believe that he was not a Kohen. I don't know the details, and I remained friendly with this rabbi because for whatever reason, I had reasons for retaining my friendship with him, an older rabbi. In any event, the question was, did the people who did their pidyon haben through him, and it wasn't that he was not that he was a chalal. No, he was a Yisrael. It was a whole mistaken identity. So the question is, did the people who had a pidyon haben through him, did they have to redeem? And the based in LA Paskin, no, they didn't have to redeem because he really is a Kohen. And he's living in sin.
So
So
he was just trying to get out of it to get married. He came up with this whole.
that's what the Beis Din's conclusion was. They felt that his argument of being not a Kohen was not a legitimate argument. He maintained that it is a legitimate argument.
You're adopted, how can you be considered a Cohen if you're not part of that family?
Well, that's what I don't know what
The details.
evidence that he brought. It seems to me that it was just very convenient that he came up with this information right before he married the divorcee. Right. So that's why it sort of raised a lot of red flags.
Timely.
Right. Anyway,
If you were a Cohen, you marry a Grushan, so you lose your complete status is gone as a Cohen.
no, it's not. You're still a Kohen.
Right, but you can't do it.
Right, you
don't
are-
get called up for an aliyah. You
That's
can't go to
right.
kitchen events.
You are
You're-
penalized because you're actively profaning your kahuna.
And if you have a child with this illicit marriage, whatever, if it's not, whatever, it's a deraisa, right? You can't,
Yeah.
is their child a Cohen?
Their child is called a halal.
So it has
And that's
a stigma on
that's
it.
the phenomenon we're discussing in this tshuva. He has certain aspects of kahuna that linger, but he can't do the avoda, and he doesn't have and he's not even allowed to. A chalal is not allowed to marry a bas kohen.
Is it the Ilam? Like he keeps going? They're like the child of that child, the grandchild, the great grandchild.
I believe so. I believe so. Although if he marries, I guess his daughters, if they marry a Yisrael, then the children are Yisraelim.
Kicked him out of the rabbinate?
What he did was, well, he no longer held his pulpit. I think that he was leaving the pulpit anyway, or that they were getting rid of him anyway. And then he went ahead and married this divorcee, and he took a small pulpit on the outskirts of the community. And some people held of him, and some people did not hold of him. But he sort of became sort of like a peripheral person. Yeah.
Pariah.
Well, I'm not sure if it was, you can call him a pariah, but yeah, a lot of people sort of turned their back on him.
I don't know of Cohen who, and he tried for many years and he was flexing that he couldn't get married. And you're talking, it was about 16, 17 years. And he married a divorcee. He just.
What's the distinction between a Kohen Gadol and a Kohen Hedger?
A Kohen Gadol can only marry a basula, a virgin. A Kohen can marry a widow.
Okay, so. then
Or-
that would be-
Well, I mean, maybe the guy didn't have enough widows to meet. You know, the market is much more limited, you know. If a guy's in his 40s or 50s, the opportunities are very, very limited when you're a Kohen.
The rabbi, the common lineage is need to be traced back, and how many Cohens can actually do that today?
Right, right.
So I mean.
And that's the reason why there were Rabbanim, like Moshe mentioned, Rabbi Gedalia Dov Schwartz. There are many poskim who used to find leniencies for Kohanim who wanted to get married to a divorcee or someone who couldn't marry a Kohen, because it's very difficult to prove that you're a Kohen.
Right.
Yeah.
World War. Was women getting married?
Yeah, and that's one of the arguments during the world wars. So many Jewish women were defiled, right, by Gentiles, right?
If it's an onus, are you punished if you lose the wife? Is raped.
If a Kohen's wife
Wife
is
is
raped,
raped.
they have to divorce. Yeah,
It's the onus and she's passive, the whole thing.
yeah.
Wow.
It's harsh.
That's brutal.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough being a Kohen.
Yeah.
You know, people don't realize it.
Straight to Donald Trump.
That's right. So anyway, so the Pischei, so what are we talking about over here? So the Pischei Tshuva creates a distinction between whether a person who does a pidyon haben who thought he was a Kohen and then discovers A, that he's a Yisrael, or B, that he's a Chalal. Okay, so there's a distinction. Dehecha shenoda shehu Yisrael yachzir es haksofim v'chayovim lachzor v'liftos es habechorim. That when he discovers that he was really Yisrael all along, so then he's got to give the money back, and the parents have to redeem their child. Aval im noda shehu ben grusha yesh safek im sarach lachzor v'liftos. But if he just discovers that he's not a kosher Kohen because his mother was a divorcee, but he's still a Kohen, which is what we call a chalal, so then there's a suffix whether he has to give the money, whether there's an obligation to redeem. So basically, since it's a suffix, whether a redemption is necessary, the Kohen can say, prove to me that the pigeon haben was not kosher, and then I'll give you back the money. But until you can do that, the Kohen can say, Hamotzi mechavero alav haraya. The chen kasav b'shut maharash angle the kashalahotzi miyara kohen hamuchza kain sham, and that's also brought down elsewhere. That there's an advantage of being a kohen chalal versus being a Yisrael. By a kohen chalal, it's a suffix whether you have to redeem or not. Avol b'shut maharshag pasak alpi masha pasak Rambam command Omer batla kahuna derak le'inyan havod arminan sha'avodas uksherish nemar barech Hashem chela. However, the Maharshag disagrees, and he says, based on what the Rambam wrote with the Ir Miklat, with the city of refuge, that his kahuna is completely batal, that it's only as far as karbanos do we say that b'di'evid his avodah is kosher, v'chein kosav Rashi b'makos, avodaso kesher v'le'inyan shar dvarim eno kohen. Meaning that Rashi says his avodah is kosher, but in all other respects, he's not a kohen, this chalal. Umavur b'devar of the lo nechshav kohen klal. Umemela ena bein padoi, and therefore the child remains in an unredeemed state. V'he'el sham sha'avoseim shel hayeladim mechuyavim lifdot od hapam etzel kohen kasher. And so therefore it comes out that the firstborn's fathers are obligated to redeem their child with a kosher kohen. And they are unequivocal that the chalal kohen has to return all the money. V'chein pasuk hamarim shik shemechuyev hakohen lahachzir demei pidyon haben kevin shenesinas ha'av haisa betos. Maram shik paskins that as well, that the parent only gave this fellow the money under false pretenses. The kevin shekol av shepodes beno mishtadel lahader acher kohen miyuchas v'talmud chacham v'yirei shamayim, that every parent wants to try to find a kohen who has proper yichus, is a scholar and a God-fearing Jew. Barur hadavar de'im ha'av haya yodea sha'kohen hazehu ben grushu ch'doime lo haya poda etzlo. Then it's clear that had the parent known that this fellow is not of good lineage, he never would have chosen him. Benimsa shahanasina ha'isa betos, and therefore, regardless of this guy's status, it was done under a false understanding, and therefore you have the chalal has to return the money. I'd like to bring proof to this based on another Rambam. Shekohen she'achal truma v'nodalo shehu ben grusha. Okay, so we're basically dealing with the financial aspects of an error made with someone's kahuna. So therefore, let's look at other cases where there is an error which has financial ramifications when someone errs in his Kohen identity. The Rambam paskins that if a Kohen eats truma, and then after he ate the truma, he discovered that his mother was a divorcee, sarich l'shalim es hakeren ve'eno mishalim es hachomesh. Normally, if a person eats truma and is not a Kohen, he has to pay back the principal plus a 25% penalty. That's according to the Torah. But here, this fellow only has to pay back the principal and he doesn't have to pay the penalty amount. Ubir sham hakesef mishnah de chomesh chayev rak bizar gamor kevin dahavi ka'avoda masha einken keren ayin sham. And the Kesef Mishnah explains that the only time a person has to pay the 25% penalty is if he's a complete non-Kohen. But here, this Kohen, this Cholol, is at least his avoda is kosher. His korbanos are kosher. And because of that, and truma is a form of avoda, therefore we would say that he only has to pay back the principal and not the penalty. Umikan raya, the mashakosov harambam shekoin cholol she'avad b'di'evet avodaso avoda, zehu davka legabi avoda v'lo legabi shar dvarim shel kahuna. He says, and from here you can adduce that when the Rambam writes that if a Kohen does the avoda b'di'evet it's kosher, when a cholol does the avoda b'di'evet it's kosher, it's only as far as karbanos, but for other things, it's not. He's not considered a Kohen at all. And that's why the Rambam says you have to pay back the principal. And based on that, it also makes sense to say that if you discover that a Kohen is a chalal, that Kohen chalal has to return the money. But there's still room to examine this further. Let me just see how much longer. Okay, it doesn't go that much longer. But he says, but there's still room to.
What does the Kohen pay back when he's true about it? Who does he pay to?
Yeah,
To the person who gave it to him.
That's a good question. I think he has to pay it to the temple.
But how do you?
I think he owes it to.
The value, I guess the value, whatever he ate or whatever he.
You evaluate what he ate.
What, value of the korban?
No,
No,
of the truma.
No, I
The
understand,
grain.
but how do you value the truma? Like it's a piece of meat that's come off a korban.
No, it's not. It's not from a korban. It's truma is this tithe that a farmer
For
gives
your field.
to
Okay.
to
So
the
if it's
Kohen.
like X
I don't know if
amount
it's to the temple or
to the person,
it could be to the farmer himself.
because then he has to give it again.
'Cause he has to
Does
give it-
he lose out his
Yes,
chutz of
yes,
his truma giving?
yes,
Of the
but
value?
Precious.
Yes,
You
you
pay-
take 10% of that and give it to the live.
Yeah, but you paid based on the price of.
His
truma.
produce has been tithed.
Right.
His produce has been tithed. So his produce, the remaining produce is fine. Has he fulfilled his obligation of the mitzvah of truma, of giving truma to a Kohen? That's what's not clear to me. It could be, so that I'm not sure whether he gives it to the farmer or I have to find out. I'll try to look
I
up,
would think that it would
I'll
go
look
back
up-
to the
I'll look
farmer,
up
that
the
he can
pasuk.
give that money again for truma.
but I'm not sure if he's chayiv to. I'm not sure if he's chayiv to do that.
But when people give truma, do they give it to a specific Kohen or do they give it to the collective?
They can give it to they give it to a specific Kohen, but they have the choice to choose which Kohen to give it to.
But does he pay back the truma or does he based on price of truma or based on the price of cooling? Cooling is more expensive.
And what is the
Right.
intrinsic value of the grain itself or the wheat?
That's what I'm saying. Cooling is more expensive than truma.
Yeah.
Cheaper because it's.
Yeah.
a limited,
It's
uh,
probably the value of truma wheat, because that's what it's valuated as. Okay. Ela diyesh makom la'ayin bazeh. He says, okay, you know what? We're going to have to hold it for today. These are all excellent questions, Rabbi Isai. Okay, we'll see you later.